Whenever I'm on a long grind in a game or a long grind in real life, like working, I like to put YouTube videos of other people doing long grinds on my second monitor to keep me company, and I guess you do too, since you clicked on this video. And for this purpose I like really long videos so I don't have to keep finding new ones all of the time. So I created this compilation of some of my best Diablo 2 farming grinds all in the same video. There's plenty of high runes and awesome uniques coming, and let's start with that time that I locked myself in lower Kurast and vowed not to leave until I had found a bear rune. Running offline lower Kurast with a player setting of 7 is the most efficient way to find a bear rune, but it can still take a lot of runs and it's incredibly boring. But let's get into it. While scouting for a good map before even starting the runs, I found a nice little gift from an armor rack. More armor rack treasure came on round 30 when I found a pair of Alder's boots. On run 74 I found the first decent rune, which was a lamp. This would be the start of a really nice set of rune drops. On run 83 I found a Sur rune. Wait, what? Only 83 runs in, I was already halfway to the bear rune. Talk about a strong start. The lucky rune streak continues on run 113 with an Ist rune. And then on run 135 a Pul rune. And an rune on run 154. The streak concludes on run 173 when I find an Ohm rune, and it's not even from a super chest. At this point, finding runes in lower Kurast just felt too easy, but of course this is a huge outlier and I got very lucky. A change of pace on run 190 when I found a pair of rare boots that are really close but didn't quite get there. On run 233 I found a perfect shimmering Grand Charm. Too bad it has no secondary stat. Another nice Grand Charm drops on run 248. The rolls aren't the best, but at least the level requirement is low. Time for some more armor rack loot on run 262. It's the unique Druid Pelt Spirit Keeper. The stats on this item just feels weird to me. On the very next run I found a Poison and Bone Skiller. I messed up the clip and threw away the original, so you're gonna have to do with a screenshot. On run 287 I found a jewel that made me very happy and very sad at the same time. I mean, it's still an ED and IS jewel, but I would really have liked a higher roll. You have to pay attention during these runs. If I had looked away I might have missed this Vex rune. Blizzard, if you're watching this on a projector in the office on a lazy Friday afternoon, thanks for the zoom function. On round 322 I found a Paladin combat skiller. After a bit of a dry spell, another skiller followed. This time a Druid elemental one. On round 512 I finally found another rune. It was just a Lem rune, but remember what happened last time we found a Lem. I don't even know what to say. After only 521 runs I already had found the bear rune, and plenty of other nice rune drops as well. Here's a recap of all the best drops, including some charms that I haven't shown before in the video. While editing this I still can't believe I found all of this in just over 500 runs. These runs might be in the running for the luckiest LK runs of all time. After a strong start with some sweet runes and charms, let's move on to some awesome uniques next, from when I did 1000 Terror Zone runs. Over the past several weeks, I spent over 45 hours running Terror Zones in Diablo 2 Resurrected. 1000 Terror Zones. This resulted in some great loot, and I mean great. I started out in the Great Marsh as a Blizzard Sorceress with 6k Blizzard damage, 105% faster cast rate and just over 400% magic find. Despite the name, there's nothing great about this marsh. It's big, it has pretty bad density and can be quite dangerous if you're not careful. Despite my 1-star review of this place, I did find a really nice small charm on the third run. Perfect damage and attack rating, with faster hit recovery as a secondary stat. On run number 6 I found this poorly rolled Skin of the Viper Magi when I accidentally teleported into the Spider Forest out of the Terror Zone. Speaking of the Spider Forest, that was the next Terror Zone, and on run number 19 I found Talrasha's weapon in the Spider Cavern. It unfortunately rolled as low as it possibly can.
The Terror Zone stayed in Act 3, and on run number 30 I found a pair of chance guards in the Ruined Temple. Unfortunately, another low roll, and that marked the end of my first Terror Zone session. When I returned, I found myself in the Mausoleum and the Crypt, and on run number 33 I found Nosferatu's Coil, a belt with increased attack speed and slows target. This is one of those items I found really cool and unique, but that I rarely end up using. On run number 41 I found the Reaper's Toll. I'm hoping to find an ethereal one of these to put on my Act 2 mercenaries, but unfortunately this wasn't it. I found another one on run 49, but that wasn't ethereal either. After a bit of a slow start, Bale stepped up and dropped an Arachnid Mesh on run 61. Not that it really matters, but this actually rolled 1% of perfect on the enhanced defense. Shortly after that, I managed a session with quite a few Terror Zones in Travancore, and on run 64 I found a Ravenfrost but with a mediocre roll. On the next run, the roll was anything but mediocre when I found this perfectly rolled Cold Thunder Charm. It was a nice little upgrade over my current one as well. 10 runs later I found a Barbarian Combat Skiller with a tiny bit of gold find. And then 10 runs after that I found a perfectly rolled Alder's Helm. The Terror Zone ended on run 94, but when clearing up the last of the council I found Talrasha's weapon. This was just marginally better than the last one I found though. Then I did 60 or so terrorized Pindle runs. The only decent drop was this rare Dual Leech Ring, which rolled really nicely. I'm not even sure what else you would wish for other than a higher roll on the damage and perhaps some stats instead of the mana. Either way, a really nice find. Later on I found myself in the Forgotten Tower, and this is a Terror Zone which I didn't anticipate liking as much as I did. Partially because it's a map with good density of champion monsters with a Countess as a bonus at the end, and partially because I had an insane lucky streak here, starting with this rare weapon on run 163. The Grandfather. Good roll too. It's a shame this is more of a trophy these days than it's actually useful. On run 170 the Countess dropped a Maelstrom, which I will always happily take. And on run 174 I had one of the best drops I've ever had in Diablo 2, this Griffon's Eye. I have never found this item before in Diablo 2 Resurrected, and it was really exciting since it really powers up a lot of cool builds. Now let's just hope for a good roll. Wow, I couldn't believe it. A perfect minus 20% on the enemy resistance roll. This was an awesome drop and an awesome feeling. Drops like this are the reason why Diablo 2 is still fun to play after all these years. This will definitely be put to good use, and minor spoiler, I'll even start using it later in this video. And only 2 runs later I found another really good item, another unique Thresher from a weapon rack, and I finally found an ethereal one. And with a great roll too. It was hard to get hyped up for this in the moment so soon after finding that Griffons, but this was an awesome find, and any other day this would probably have been the highlight drop of that day. The lucky streak in the tower concluded on run 179 when the Countess dropped a Pal Rune as well as the weapon from the Griswold set. The weapon rolled 4 sockets, which is the most important roll, even if the ED was kind of low, and a Pal Rune as a little bonus is always welcome. Shortly after, the Terror Zone changed from the tower to Tristram, which is also a nice zone since it's so small but always has several champion boss packs in addition to Griswold himself. And my first good drop came on run 192 when I found a perfect Poison Thunder Charm, though I'm not even sure if Poison Nova Necromancers use these. I did a total of about 40 runs, but I didn't find much else interesting this time apart from a pretty good Cold Thunder Charm and another good Poison Thunder. Next up was Mephisto, and on one of the first runs, the Council Pack dropped a pair of rare Magic Find boots which were decent, but missing a stat and maybe some more fire resist to be really crazy. On run 246 I found Immortal King's Stone Crusher with a perfect 40% crushing blow. And 2 runs later, the Council members dropped a Skulder's Ire. On run 258 Mephisto dropped an Arachnid Mesh. Unfortunately it was ethereal, but I didn't mind too much since this was on single player, so I can't trade anyway, and I have a few spare ones collecting dust already. I found a very nice small charm in the Cold Plains on run 266. Max cold resist and a decent chunk of magic find too, the perfect small charm for this sorceress. Another decent Thunder Charm on run 269 in the caves. And it's a lightning one with minus 73% on the resist roll. I have found very few lightning ones, and this is the best one I found by far. I did a few runs in the River of Flame, and on run 280 I found another perfect Immortal King Stone Crusher. Visiting the Halls of Pain, I found a green Colossus Blade on run 318. Bulkathos Sacred Charge. You may notice that it's lacking knockback, which was an update in a recent patch for Diablo 2 Resurrected, where they removed the knockback from this weapon. I'm trying to keep my expectations low, but man would it be awesome if we got more updates to old items with terrible stats like this. About 60 runs later I found a unique winged axe, Warshrike. Unfortunately it wasn't ethereal, but quite a good roll on the ED otherwise. On round 392 I found a green Corona, the helm from the Griswold set. Between this and the weapon of the set, it's kind of ridiculous how rare this set is in relation to how good it is. Then on run 404 another elite set piece dropped. And this time it was the Immortal King's armor. This is a rare set item that I can actually get behind since the Immortal King set is awesome. More barbarian gear on run 411 when a unique Slayer's Guard drops. Ariat's face. Isn't Ariat the mountain, so is it face like the face of a person or is it face like the surface of the mountain? I digress. The next terror zone was the Catacombs, and this was really exciting. I haven't ran terrorized Andariel too much myself, but she's often talked about as one of the best terror zones, so I was pretty hyped when I saw this come up. The first interesting find from Andariel came on run 420 when she dropped a unique amulet, which turned out to be a High Lord's Wrath. On run 424 it was time for another crazy rare drop. While teleporting through the Catacombs I stopped and cleared any champion packs most of the time, and on run 424 one of those packs dropped a unique Hydra bow. The frickin' Wind Force. I've mentioned before that this is one of my all-time favorite items in Diablo 2, and it rolled a nice perfect 8 on the Mana Steel 2. I was so busy checking it out in all of its glory that I didn't notice my mercenary getting absolutely destroyed in the background. Whoops. On round 426 I found a pair of Alder's boots. It's not the most exciting drop, but these rolled a perfect 50% on the fire resist, so they are definitely going in the stash. And later on that same run I found a decently rolled Eshudas. But let's be honest, with items that have a variable roll on +2 skills, it's impossible to be excited by anything but a max roll. Before moving on, she also dropped a Manald on run 448, and then 2 runs later, a pretty good String of Ears. A nice little surprise came from the Countess on round 469 when she dropped an Istrun. On round 472, Mephisto dropped a Storm Shield. And on round 479, he dropped a unique Grand Charm. And after a lot of Sunder Charms, this turned out to be a Guide's Fortune. The roll was nothing to be excited about though. And on round 487, the Council Pack dropped a unique ring, but it turned out to be just a Dwarf Star. After completing the 500th run and being halfway to the goal of 1000, I decided to switch it up a little. I really wanted to put the Griffin's Eye that I found to use, so I picked up my assassin which was parked in Early Nightmare and played her through the rest of the game. At level 65, I finally decided to make the Enigma, which I have been sitting on the runes for since I ran lower Kurast in another video, and teleporting as an assassin feels awesome. At level 76, I equipped the Griffin's Eye after putting my best lightning facet into it. Ah, a thing of beauty. And once I finished up Bale in Hell and unlocked terror zones, this is what her gear looked like. She was only level 80 at this point, and ideally she would have been higher level before going into terror zones, but I wanted to get on with the runs as soon as possible. I don't have an assassin torch in single player yet, so she is using a druid one just for the stats and the resists. And here's a look at her stats, most importantly 236 magic find. It took a while to get used to the playstyle, but she is both powerful and fun to play. And on her very first run I found an Arm of King Leoric in the Crystalline Passage. On run 509 she got a unique Spired Helm, which can be either the amazing Nightwing's Veil or the much less amazing Veil of Steel, and this time I was almost relieved that it was the latter since the helm rolled ethereal. On run 520 she found a low rune from an enemy which had died off screen. High runes dropping from enemies dying off screen is one of my greatest fears in Diablo 2, and the assassin's traps often shoot things that are far off screen. Luckily I didn't miss this one though, and I happily scooped it up from the ground. Later in the video I will roll a rune word with this, and the results are, well, you'll see. On run 522 I found an ethereal Colossus Vold, and I put it in the cube hoping for 4 sockets, but no luck this time since it rolled 3 instead. On run 533 I had another chance when an ethereal Mancatcher dropped, but this one had 3 sockets already. This assassin must have been blessed by the rune gods themselves, because only 34 runs after finding the low rune in the pits she found another high rune while running the Glacial Trail. The drop came from a skeleton which dropped a Sur rune, and since I already had a Sur rune in my stashes, this was kind of like finding a bear rune, which made the drop 10 times more exciting. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with it yet, but I'm sure I'll find a good use for it. I mean, it's not hard to find a use for a bear rune. On run 568 in the Black Marsh, I found a unique Grand Charm, which turned out to be a Lightning Thunder Charm with 1% of perfect on the resist roll. And this was an upgrade for the assassin, an ever so slight one, but we take those. On run 620 I was back in the pits and found another Arachnid Mesh, and at this point in my single player career I don't really know what to say about these anymore. On run 631 I found a Rainbow Facet, but rolls like this won't raise the eyebrows of even the most desperate of fire mages. On run 644 I found a rollercoaster of emotions in the cow level. My brain registered the +3 elemental skills, the plus life and the +3 and +2 before actually processing what skills it rolled. This is the biggest tease of a magic item I have found in quite a while. The game tried to make up for it by dropping a pair of Gore Riders on the next run, but I'm not that easily cheered up. Run 652 was a bit of a special one, giving me 3 at least decently interesting items in one run in the Stony Tomb. The first drop was a Crown of Thieves, followed by an offensive aura skiller for the Paladin, and then a Fire Thunder Charm. Not amazing items by any standard, but in a game where you can go tens or even hundreds of runs without finding anything, finding 3 items in one run is kind of special. Once this terror zone ended, I called it a night and took a break, which ended up lasting for a couple of days. At this point, I started feeling a bit worn out from all the grinding. I swapped to my Blizzard Sorceress and basically only progressed this project when there was a really good or easy terror zone to run, like Mephisto and Andariel, or the really small zones like Tristram and Travancore. On run 660 while running Andariel, I found the weapon from the Natalia set, which is the first time this has dropped for me in D2R. On run 661 I found a set Winged Helm, which is G-Face. Yeah, I'm not even gonna try and pronounce that. On run 678 I found a unique amulet for the first time in a while. And? Nope. On run 684 I found a unique faceblade, which turned out to be the lightsaber. Still looking for that Azureth. On run 687, Andariel dropped another elite weapon which can be 2 different uniques. A legendary mallet can be either the Stone Crusher or the much more rare Schaefer's Hammer. And I kid you not, with this being Schaefer's, 3 out of the 4 unique legendary mallets I have found in Diablo 2 Resurrected have been Schaefer's. What are the odds of that? I found a skiller on run 691, a shapeshifting skiller with a tiny bonus to life. On run 694 I found a unique crossbow, the Demon Machine. I've seen people use this on a pretty cool enchant sorceress, but I have yet to try that myself. On run 714 in Tristram I found another teaser of a magic druid pelt. +3 to elemental and +2 to tornado, but only a +1 on the tornado roll made me kind of sad. On run 746 Mephisto dropped the green diadem from the Mavina set. On run 764 he dropped a unique ring. Let's hope for something good. On run 774, Mephisto dropped the unique Barbarian Helm, Wolfhowl. This was overall a pretty good roll, and this is one of those items that I really like but I don't ever use. As cool as the Wolf Barbarian is, the complete lack of area damage really kills the build unfortunately. On run 790 I found this Paladin Shield, which is pretty cool I guess if you're into that kind of thing. On run 823 I was back at Andariel and found a bow to go with the diadem I found earlier for the Mavina set. 188 ED is actually not a roll range, it always rolls exactly 188. Just why? On the next run, Andariel dropped a very cool item that I don't think I've ever really used on a character. Arcane's Valor. I guess the +2 to all skills was a bigger deal before we had rune words. And on the next run, for the 3rd rare drop in a row, I found a unique Bone Visage. Giant Skull. Unfortunately it only rolled 1 socket, but I'm not sure I would have found a good use for this even if it had rolled with 2. On run 833, Andariel dropped another unique that can be 2 different items. This time it was a Horizons Tornado as opposed to the much rarer and more sought after Stormlash. I guess I can't get lucky every time. On run 849 I found an ethereal version of the Scalper. I am a sucker for self-repairing ethereal items, but I'm not sure if this is good enough to be used by a Throwbarb even if it's ethereal. On run 876 the Countess dropped a unique Grand Charm. This turned out to be a perfect Thunder Charm of the fire kind, and it was a really nice find and a big upgrade over the best one I had prior to finding this one. I was finding some really nice items, but it started to feel a bit one-dimensional and boring to be so selective in the terror zones that I ran. When terror zones were first introduced, I was excited to be able to run new and different areas in the endgame. I also started to feel a bit more motivated to grind for loot again, so for the last 100 runs, I decided to skip act bosses completely and tried to do areas which I respect my sorceress to Nova and started clearing bigger areas, and the Nova sorceress is really good at clearing areas. After an uneventful first 10 or so rounds, I started raking in some nice drops, starting with a unique amulet on round 912. A perfect 30 to all resistances, Maras. This caught me completely off guard and there's not much else to say about this drop than wow! On round 917 I found a quite rare pair of gloves, the unique Ogre Gauntlets, Steel Red. And on the same run I found a unique ring from the Countess, which ended up being a Nagel ring with 29% magic find. On the very next run, from the very first pack after entering the tower, I found a rainbow facet, and it turned out to be a beautiful 5/5 cold facet. I had actually been looking for any cold facet to put in the Nightwing's Veil for my cold sorceress, but finding a perfect one was awesome. Well, I guess my cold Sork is now a Nova Sork, but I got a couple more respec tokens saved up. Later on, I found another cool ethereal item with the self-repair mod, Hones Undone. It also has other really good stats like massive crushing blow and 3 open sockets. The Either roll was kind of low on this one though, but I still hope I can put this to use sometime because it's a really cool stick. On round 932 I found another bow from the Mavina set. On round 943 I almost missed a drop by teleporting away just as my mercenary was finishing off a straggler. This Immortal King's armor was all Yulehara's, thanks. To follow that up, on the very next run I found the Immortal King's Stonecrusher as well. It was a perfect roll and it felt extra cool to find this right after the armor. This was also the third perfect IK weapon I found during these runs. On round 960 I found Valkyrie Wing in the Ancient Tunnels. A good roll, but this helm just gets outclassed by other options. On round 977 I found an Ethereal Mancatcher. I punched sockets into it with the cube, but still no luck hitting 4 sockets. In Talrash's tomb on round 982 I found the unique Dust Shroud, Ormus Robes. 3 to enchant seems like it could potentially be useful on some niche build, I don't really know, but I'm putting it in the stash for now. And that was the last interesting drop from the 1000 runs, but it didn't feel good to end on a mediocre drop, so I decided to keep running until I found something interesting, and on round 1016 I found a skin of the Viper Magi. A good roll here could be a nice finish, but this roll was anything but nice. Well, that's no fun either, so instead I decided to roll my first single player grief with the low rune that I found earlier. I mean, it's still a grief, but that is one ugly looking roll. Enigma is arguably the most powerful item in the entire game, because it completely opens up the endgame by allowing every class to use the skill teleport, and the other stats aren't so bad either. This rune word requires some extremely rare runes though, which usually requires you to trade in your rare loot, a big chunk of luck, or an insane amount of grinding. I recently did a challenge with this paladin where I beat the entire game without any gear, so here he was, completely gearless at the start of the endgame. So I thought I might as well try and farm the runes for Enigma as soon as possible. It would be a huge upgrade for the character, and I thought it would be an interesting experiment to see how long it took. And it took way longer than I expected. I should really have crunched some numbers before attempting this. I'm doing this in single player on a completely self-found character, so obviously no trading or multiplayer, but also no starting gear or other help from any of my other characters via the shared stash. Before I started the hunt for Hyrules, I needed some basic gear. I had initially planned for this to be a separate video, but it turned out to be kind of boring watching me do 10-minute Countess runs with a naked character. So instead, here's a recap of the initial gearing process. The most reliably farmed starting gear is rune words, so I began by farming the Countess in Hell with a Holy Bolt Paladin. The runs weren't fast, but it was quite safe and easy even without any gear, since every enemy in the Forgotten Tower is either demon or undead, and the narrow corridors and doorways makes it so that you're usually only attacked from one direction. I found the runes for Spirit, Insight, Lore and Stealth, as well as some other magical and rare items to fill all of my gear slots. I then respec'd to a Hammerdin and began farming normal and nightmare cows for base items to make Spirit heal. I didn't want to waste a socketing quest on a crystal sword, so finding the bases for Spirit took longer than I hoped for, several hours of grinding, but I did eventually find both a broadsword and a decent paladin shield with 4 sockets. I also tried my luck with some magic find runs in the pits, Travancore and some terror zones, including terrorized Andariel. I did find some decent starter gear, but my magic find was really low and my clear speed mediocre, so it felt like a lot of work with not much to show for it. The most notable find was a single rune. I ended up spending almost 10 hours in preparation before I even started the rune hunt. That was a bit more than I had planned, mostly thanks to it taking so long to find the spirit bases. But I did manage to put together some decent starting gear. Nothing to brag about on the internet, but it was enough to get a Hammerdin going. I was wearing a spirit sword together with a spirit shield, which was the foundation for this character, and those 2 items together was probably more powerful than the rest of my gear combined. I also wore a lore helm and a magical amulet with some skills. A body armor socketed with some runes for resistances, though I would eventually replace this with a stealth rune word for the faster cast rate and run speed. Gloves with resistances, a rare FCR ring, a crafted caster belt, a dwarf star, and some boots with faster run walk. To be able to make the Enigma, I would need a Jar rune and a Bear rune, or 3 Bear runes, or 6 Sur runes, or 12 Low runes, or 24 Ohm runes, or I found it best not to think about how many runes I would need to cube or find, but instead got straight into farming. And I started out in lower Kurast, opening super chests with a player settings of 7. This is, as far as I know, the most efficient way to farm Enigma, even though you can't find a Jar rune from the chests. This was a good place to start since it didn't require me to kill monsters, just run as fast as I could, avoid damage and open chests. Though even with very limited gear, the Hammerdin could slowly handle monsters even on player 7 if needed. Before I even started the run counter while looking for a good map, I found a paladin shield with 4 open sockets and 44 to all resistances, which makes for a great spirit base, quite a bit better than the one I was currently wearing. I did not have the runes to make another spirit right away, but I got around to upgrading it eventually. The rune hunt had officially started, and 17 runs in the drops were kicked off on my first humble little M rune. It was unlikely that this was going to be cubed all the way up to be included in the Enigma, but it is the lowest rune which I personally qualify as an interesting find, at least on a new character, so for the sake of this video I will only mention rune drops of Lem or higher. On run 41 I found a really nice small charm. A fine small charm of Vida, with the important 3 to max damage and decent rolls on the other stats. This would have been really nice for another character focusing on physical damage. There are also a lot of charms to be found in Lower Kurast, but since my focus is on runes, I will only mention the really good charms I find, and then I will try to do some kind of recap at the end. Then I unfortunately had a dry streak of 200 runs. It sounds like a lot, and it was, but it is to be expected of Diablo 2 and Lower Kurast in particular. The streak was broken by a Gull rune, which isn't that exciting on its own, but it is half a Vex rune, which could mean a big upgrade in the form of the Heart of the Oak rune word. I then found a Pull rune on run 290 and another Lem on run 361. I was very focused on opening the chest as fast as possible, skipping almost everything else to get the runtime shorter. My average runtime was a little bit over 45 seconds, including load times and managing my inventory and stash, which I thought was pretty decent. I like it when runs are under a minute, because then it feels like the run counter is ticking up fairly fast. But this is a lot slower than what a sorceress with teleport and telekinesis can do. And then on run 364 I found my first high rune. A low rune. Not exactly what I was looking for this character, but I couldn't complain. This could perhaps come in useful later as either a grief for smiting the Ubers or a fortitude for my mercenary. My first decent drop from something else than a super chest came on run 412 when a log gave me a Lem rune. I had a staff with teleport charges on my weapon switch, but I only used it to teleport from the waypoint into the first hut to save a little bit of time. Using it too much would mean I have to repair it too often, costing both time and gold. On run 460 I teleported off the waypoint and found a Mal rune in the very first chest. That was then followed by a Pull rune 30 runs later. And another 30 runs later I found the highest rune so far, a Sur rune. Nice, that's half of a Bear rune, and while I was of course hoping for an actual Bear rune to drop, at least the runes had been dropping fairly consistently, but little did I know that that was about to change. For the next 250 runs I found absolutely nothing. I can't stress this enough: if you are going to farm lower Kurast, set up a TV or a second monitor with something to watch while you run, because grinding lower Kurast is really boring, and farming for hours with nothing to show for it can be very demotivating. The dry streak was eventually broken on run 767 when I found another gull rune. I should maybe have saved all of the runes towards the Enigma, but I took the other gull and a pull out of the stash, cubed the 2 gull runes to make a Vex, and made the Heart of the Oak rune word, which is going to be the endgame weapon for this character. It rolled a 37 to all resist, which is a good roll that I was happy with. I unfortunately did not have enough stat points saved to get the required dex right away, but that turned out to be an opportunity for a well-deserved break from the rune grind. I was pretty close to a level up, so it shouldn't take too long anyway. And while doing so, I found a unique grand charm. This character's very first Kid's Fortune, and a decent roll too. Magic Find doesn't help with the drops from Super Chest in lower Kurast, but it was surely going to be useful later. I got the level up, equipped my shiny new weapon, and went back to the grind. Not even 20 runs later, I found an actual Vex rune. Now I was suddenly really hoping that I wouldn't end up being exactly 1 Vex rune short from cubing a bear later on and regret making the Hoto. Then I only found a Mal rune on run 960 as well as a Pal rune on 977 before I hit the milestone of 1000 runs. After 1000 runs done, which took just under 14 hours of playtime, I had found a little less than 1 bear rune worth of runes in total. And for clarity, when I talk about rune values in this video, I always mean in terms of what I can make in the cube, not trade value online. This result was decent progress towards the goal, or a big waste of time depending on how you look at it. The only charm I mentioned was the fine small charm of Vida, but I had found a decent pile of charms in total that I saved in the stash. Unfortunately, no paladin combat skillers or any really good skillers at all, to be honest. And of course a lot of crafting ingredients and mid-level runes, but I eventually stopped picking up most of these because the stash tabs were filling up really quickly. To break up the grinding, I decided to try my luck at Travancore with a player setting of 3. The council members have a good chance to drop high runes all the way up to Cham, including the Jar rune I needed. But make no mistake, when I say good drop chance, I mean compared to other monsters. The chance is still incredibly low. In addition, I was also way more likely to find other good items like uniques from Travancore than from lower Kurast. And on the very first run I found a unique ring, which turned out to be a Ravenfrost. A good omen perhaps? Well, not really. I found Travancore to currently be too hard for my character. The runs took a bit too long and were a bit too dangerous, so after completing 20 runs and deciding that they were currently not worth it, I crawled back to lower Kurast for round 2. But I will come back to Travancore later for many more runs, once lower Kurast has really broken my spirit. My return to lower Kurast started off rather slow with nothing in the first 150 runs, and then a Pal rune on run 1158, followed by 2 Lem runes on runs 1170 and 1205. Then I found perhaps the best small charm I have ever found, or at least very close to it. On run 1320 I found a shimmering small charm of Vida. Unfortunately neither of the rolls were perfect, but still quite good. This will likely be used on many of my characters to come. 200 runs later, I finished run number 1523, which was exactly 1000 runs since I found the last good rune we deserved, though this milestone was really not a cause for celebration. On run 1640, Mother Nature felt sorry for my string of bad drops and hid a unique pair of javelins in a log. These were Titan's Revenge, which are absolutely great on the Javason, but while it's not the most important for this item, the roll was pretty bad. While I did watch things in the background while doing these runs, I could not stop paying attention. See if you can spot the orange flash when I open this chest on run 1696 before it goes away. Absolute insanity. We need some kind of loot filter in this game and we need it now. But at least this was finally another good rune drop. Unfortunately it wasn't a bear this time either, but this Surun meant that I had at least acquired the bear required for Enigma. Or should I say the first bear. Anyway, it was just so nice to make some progress towards the Enigma and break up the streak of bad luck I was facing. Though after that, sir, I only found a single Lem rune on run 1819 before I hit 2000 runs. Wow, the second half of those runs were really terrible compared to the first, not only the quality of the drops, but also the quantity. I had now spent over 26 hours in lower Kurast in total. This was of course spread out over several days, but what a grind, and the bad luck in the second half was not good for my motivation to push on. I was expecting to have to do a few thousand of these runs for the Enigma, but I was really hoping to have found more runes at this point, sitting only at a single bear rune and some change.
After hitting this milestone, two things were on my mind. First, what was I thinking? Why did I think this would be a good idea? And secondly, I needed to switch it up and farm something else, even if it meant being less efficient in theory. So I swapped my gear around for a bit more survivability and got my faster cast rate up to the 125% breakpoint, and decided to give Travancore another try. Before I started, I cubed up most of the runes that I had found so far, including making the bear rune. I cubed every rune from Fallen up, and afterwards the stash looked a bit empty, to be honest. Going from 75 to 125 FCR made the Trav runs noticeably quicker than the last time, and I also re-rolled my map so that all the council members spawned outside of the temple. The runs weren't quite as fast as in lower Kurast, but I felt like the run times were at least decent. They were still dangerous though if they spawned with something like Cursed or the Conviction Aura, but after setting into the flow of runs I could do them pretty safely and consistently. The first rune drop from the council came on run 78, and it was a Mal rune. On run 89 I found a unique serpent skin armor. This is of course the skin of the Viper Magi, and I got a great roll with just one off perfect on the all resist roll. I was of course hoping to replace this with the Enigma as soon as possible, but for now this was a nice upgrade for the character over the stealth armor that he was wearing, and I actually think this is the best roll, or maybe tied for best, that I have found in Diablo 2 Resurrected, as I know for a fact that I have yet to find a perfect one. More good unique loot came on run 110 when I found Andariel's visage. It would have been cool if it was ethereal, but even as is, my mercenary will eventually find this quite useful, I think. The first piece of unique jewelry since my return to Travancore dropped on run 124. This time it was a nail ring with one of perfect on the magic find, but I have a feeling that this character will have a hard time fitting a ring without the FCR into his gear. On round 140 I found Skalder's Ire, and while it gives a lot of magic find, I needed the FCR and the resist of my current armor. Then I had a string of OK rune drops starting with an rune on 205, a Lem rune on 211 and a Pal on 224. On round 298 I found a unique Dusk Shroud, Ormus Robe. While Chain Lightning isn't a completely unusable skill, I don't think I would ever find a use for this armor. On round 316 I found another Mal rune, and then another one 75 runs later on 381. I believe Mal was the most common rune I found during this video, if I'm not counting mid runes like Ral, that is. I found another neat little small charm around 397 with 7% magic find coupled with a decent roll of cold resist. I have found this once before, and while I haven't ever used it on a character yet, it's a nice item to find just because it's so rare. On round 560 I found a nice rare circlet. It was a really good helm for this paladin, especially since I was running in Act 3, so I valued the faster run walk very highly. A nice and somewhat unexpected upgrade for the helm slot. On round 578 I had a triple drop of decent items, Parasha's weapon, Mavina's gloves and a unique amulet. Now neither of them was anything special, at least not for this character, but it was cool to find all three in the same drop. And I got another multi-drop on run 650 when I found a set and a unique amulet on the same run. Unfortunately, neither was anything special this time either. I then had some minorly interesting drops over the next 50 rounds, like a Lem rune, a Cat's Eye, a Ravenfrost and a Tal's Belt with a terrible roll. Diablo 2 is truly a game of randomness, and something that can happen is that you can get really unlucky for long stretches of time and then really lucky all at once. And for the first 700 crab rounds I felt pretty unlucky, finding only a few truly noteworthy items at all. But then all of a sudden it completely turned around. On round 701 I found another unique ring. Another Ravenfrost, but this time it was a really good roll, perfect on the dexterity and a pretty high roll on the attack rating too. I think this might be the best Ravenfrost I have found. And on round 720 I found my first rainbow facet. This kind of surprised me since the council is supposedly a good place to farm for facets, but I guess I was only using 150 or so magic find, but still. And it rolled one of perfect fire, with the oh so important -5 to the enemy resist, a very decent find. Then only 4 runs later, the council dropped their first high rune, another Sir rune. This was such a relief since it had now been another 1000 runs since I last found a good rune, and this also marked the halfway point to the Enigma, or slightly past it if I take all the runes into account. Still a long way to go, but this was important for my motivation to keep grinding. But the lucky streak was far from over, because just a few runs later I found another rainbow facet, and this time it was of the poison variety and it rolled a perfect 5-5 on the stats. An awesome drop, but it was still not done, because just 10 runs later another Sir rune dropped. Truly nothing for hours upon end, and then all at once. So to recap, in a span of less than 20 runs I found 2 Sir runes or a bear and 2 good facets.
I had been spending every 8th rune I found on crafting caster belts, and in town on round 749 I finally managed to craft one with 10% faster cast rate, and this was going to be an important piece of my gear once I finished the Enigma to reach the highest faster cast breakpoint. It is of course outclassed by arachnid mesh, but crafted caster belts are a great little piece of budget gear for casters that I think people sometimes forget about. I then found another facet, but this time I was due for a bad roll, and then another pal rune, before good luck would strike again. I went to town to spend some of the gold that kept building up from the council, since I had a decent circlet now and I was planning to do a lot of amulet crafting once I was a little bit higher level. I decided to gamble boots, hoping for a nice pair of rares with faster run walk-in magic find. And since the difference in gold cost between different types of boots is so small at this level, I decided to gamble light-plated boots just for the tiny chance that I would gamble a pair of war travelers. Ridiculous odds, I know, but on just the 4th gamble I actually got the war travelers. Just let me emphasize how insane that is. Not only is it rare to get a unique item from gambling, but it also needed to roll to be upgraded to battle boots instead of light-plated boots on the same gamble. And to top it off, it was a really good roll too. Moments like this still get me to jump out of my chair even after so many years of Diablo 2. After 800 runs, I paused to reassess the situation. With the 2 recent Sur runes, I had gone from being behind schedule to being pretty close to my goal. Well, still a bear rune short, but I felt a lot closer. And as I was now missing a bear rune rather than a jar rune, I decided to go back to lower Kurast since it is in theory faster, and 800 runs in Travancore was a decent break, so I felt ready to endure another 1000 runs or so. Saying this out loud while recording has me wondering, am I crazy? Are Diablo 2 players inherently insane? Well, that's a bit too much introspection, less thinking, more grinding. I continued the runs where I left off, and 94 runs in, or around 2094 in total, I found my very first and unfortunately only Paladin combat skiller. It even had a little bit of life on it too, even if the roll was on the low side. A very nice find and one that I had been looking forward to. For comparison, my defensive aura skiller count was now up to 5 in total. Other than that skiller, my return to LK started off slow, but not completely fruitless. My rune stash kept on slowly building up, with a Mal rune on round 2210 and then another one on round 2292. On round 2345 I found a nice little small charm with perfect lightning resist and a decent bit of life, though the life roll is far from perfect. Still, small charms with 2 good stats are always nice to find and very useful. Then more runes with a Mal on round 2464, and I think my brain shut off here because I'm not sure what I was doing while trying to show the rune for the video, but I ended up dying to some random monsters. And then another Gull rune on round 2472, and this was a notable drop because now I had reached the point where if I had not used a Vex rune to make my Heart of the Oak, I could have cubed all the way up to another Sur rune. I did want a Hoto on this character eventually, but now I kind of regretted making it because I just wanted to be done with the Enigma grind and leave lower Kurast behind. Though even if I had that Sur, I would still be another Sur short, so maybe it wouldn't end up mattering if I could find a bear rune. I kept on finding decent runes that made me feel like I made some progress, but in reality they didn't push me that much closer to my end goal, like this Pal rune on round 2492, or a Mal rune on 2614, or another Mal on round 2640. Seriously, what was it with all the Mal runes? But I guess I shouldn't complain about Mal runes, because on round 2765 I found a Lamb, but the pendulum swung the other way next, and on round 2786 I found an Ist rune. I would describe my return to lower Kurast as uneventful progress. Things kept slowly going forward, but I was not really excited by any individual drop, but that was about to change. On round 2800 I found the first non-facet jewel which I found worth including in the video, a Ruby Jewel of Fervor. Now anytime this drops I can't not think about how I wish this was the enhanced damage and attack speed jewel, because that is also called Ruby Jewel of Fervor, but this was still an awesome find. I'm probably going to put it in the Andariel's visage that I found earlier and make a nice gift for my mercenary. Ideally, I would want to wait for an ethereal one to drop, but always waiting for something a little better is also a good way to never use any of your good loot. And then around 2818 I was finally blessed with another high rune. And it was another Sur rune, so it was my 5th Sur rune in total. I did feel a little bit unlucky that not a single one of those could have been a bear rune to speed up the process, but it was what it was. The situation where I'm missing the Vex rune that I put in my Hoto had become a reality, but that honestly didn't bother me too much. I was now so close to the finish line that I just kept on going. And about 50 runs later, I did my final lower Kurast run. Another Gull rune. Now, it wasn't a bear or a Sur, but it was enough. Now here's a fair warning, if you're sensitive to seeing rune value wasted, I suggest you look away now, because I'm about to cube all of these runes. This is truly the dark side of the single player experience. So here I was at last. I had finally gotten my Ja, Ith and Bear runes for the Enigma, now just to make the rune word. Whoops, that doesn't go first. With a sigh of relief, it was finally done. I had farmed a self-found Enigma completely from scratch. Here's a few quick stats about the runs. I did a total of 2,866 lower Kurast runs and 800 Travincal runs. Those took 39 hours and 13 hours respectively. Those times include load times, inventory management, identifying and selling loot, repairing my gear, etc. I did find a lot of decent charms, but I only mentioned the best ones during the highlights. I found 25 skillers in total, and 6 of them were bow and crossbow skillers for the Amazon, and 5 were defensive skillers for the Paladin. I also found 5 7% magic find small charms, as well as several 5 and 6% ones that I saved in my stash. I just finished running Pindleskin 1,000 times. He really does suck most of the time, and there's so many other targets I could be running, but I just can't help myself. The runs are so fast and easy to do, and there's always the chance that you hit the jackpot. So, here I am. Again. Damn. Anyway, let's get to the loot. I started these runs one day when I noticed that Pindle was terrorized, and my very first decent drop was a Terror Zone exclusive. Not a great roll, but this was actually my first Cold Thunder charm, so I was just happy to have one. On run 41, I found an item that's always fun to identify, chance cards. These ones weren't very fun to identify though. On run 61, I found Alder's armor. And this one actually rolled anti-perfect. On run 77, I teleported a bit too far into Pindle and I was so flustered that I hit my caps lock a few times. I survived and I found a legendary mallet. This is usually the Stone Crusher, but this time it was a Schaefer's. This is actually the second Schaefer's I found, so now I'm thinking of doing a double swing barbarian with 2 of these. Sounds fun. I managed to do 106 runs while Pindle was terrorized. Once it was over, the terror zone changed to the catacombs. Now, I am doing Pindle runs for this video, but in my recent Andariel video a lot of comments were about how great she is when she's terrorized. So I felt like I just had to do a quick T-tour, and it ended up paying off big time. Almost right away I had a nice double drop with a rainbow facet and a sundering charm. The charm is an improvement of the one I found earlier at Pindle, and the rainbow facet is pretty nice, -5 + 4 lightning. A short while later I found another sundering charm. This was a fire one and it actually rolled better than the one I'm using, so I guess I found an upgrade. Nice. I also found a unique amulet. Nothing super exciting, but I haven't actually found an Atma Scarab yet, so I didn't mind. And the final drop before I go back to Pindle is another rainbow facet. It was another -5 + 4 lightning one, which I guess I can't complain about, but it would be nice to find a 5/5 someday. Okay, back to Pindle, and this time it's the regular old normal Pindle. On run 156 I found my first skiller. It was a Warcry one with added gold find. I have no idea how useful this is, but I guess I'll keep it for now. On run 212 I found a rare jewel. It's not very good, but the stats are 777, which should mean good luck, right? On run 214 I found a green chaos armor, which is the Triangle Scales. Another skiller drops on run 271. Unfortunately, it's just a summoning skiller for the druid. I just don't see myself making one of these anytime soon, if ever. On run 341 I found a unique Spired Helm, and for once it was actually a Nightwing's Veil. I was super excited about this drop, now I just need to make sure I use it and not store it on a mule forever. Then there was a big bunch of nothing for a while, but the dry spell was broken on run 479 by an amulet. It was just a Nokosan relic though. On run 492 I found a Warshrike. Unfortunately it wasn't ethereal, otherwise an average roll. On run 506 I found a rare ring which I thought was pretty cool. It's not insane or anything, but it looks pretty good on a teleporting melee character. On run 557 I found a Tal Rasha's belt. And it rolled as low as it possibly can. Then on the very next run I found a skin of the Viper Magi. The best I found so far is a plus 29 to all resist, but unfortunately this wasn't an improvement. I found another rare ring on run 627. Nothing crazy, but dual leech rings have been really rare for me in Diablo 2 Resurrected for some reason, and the 100 attack rating on top is a nice bonus. Another rare item on run 652, but this time it's more of a troll/tease item, like what am I gonna do with plus 2 shapeshifting skills on a faster cast circlet. Next is a pretty common but still great item. Trengul's gloves. On run 706 I found a unique Colossus blade. The Grandfather. Now I didn't really play with this item back in its glory days, but I made sure to pay my respects to this legendary icon. After another pretty long dry spell, I found an item which I thought represented myself and this channel pretty well. A lucky Grand Charm of Greed. I found another Colossus blade on run 886, and this time it was the set item, Bulkathos Sacred Charge. I had a pretty exciting drop on run 907, the armor from the Immortal King set. Green sacred armors are usually bittersweet, but Pindle is an exception where I would always prefer to find a green one over a gold one. The reason being that Pindle actually can't drop Tyrells, so any unique sacred armor you find from him is just going to be a Templar's Might. On run 955 I found the Reaper's Toll, really hoping for an ethereal one here since I still have to find one, but unfortunately this wasn't it. On run 968 I found another skiller, and this time it was a shapeshifting skiller to go with the faster cast circlet from earlier. Nearing the end of the runs, but there's still one big item drop left. Unfortunately no griffins or D-webs yet. On the other hand, I also didn't find any unique sacred armors, which would have been such a feel-bad moment. Oh for f***. I just finished 1000 Andariel runs in Diablo 2 Resurrected. This video will be a summary of the runs and more importantly, the drops. So why would anyone want to run Andariel in the first place? Aren't there much better bosses to farm? Well, for the most part yes, but I can think of 3 reasons to run her off the top of my head. She's a good target for some items, for example jewelry. She's easy to farm compared to some of the later bosses, both in that it's easy to reach her and the fight itself. And finally, variety is nice. If you're tired of running Mephisto over and over, it can be a nice change of pace to do a few Andariel runs. And yes, I'm aware of the irony of talking about variety in a video about running the same target 1000 times. So, why did I run her? Well, I really wanted a Tal Rasha's amulet as well as a Stone of Jordan ring. Besides, I just felt like doing some Andy runs, so I guess that's a 4th reason. Andariel has a glaring weakness in that her fire resist is absolute garbage, so I'm going to use the mighty fire sorcerers to run her. But with a twist. As an additional challenge, I'm gonna start her off in very low budget gear. It will be fun and frustrating. Her gear consists of the following: some easy to make rune words, most notably the Spirit Sword, a socketed breastplate for a nice magic find boost, and then some pretty decent magic items which I spend about 10 minutes shopping for from merchants in town. The jewelry consists of a gambled amulet as well as 2 jade rings which I made from the cube, just for some poison resist. I started out as a pure fire sorceress, but I found the many fire immune enemies in the room to be very annoying with no way to deal with them. Partially because they block your spells and soak up damage for Andariel, but also since this sorceress is so undergeared and underleveled. Even a few hits from a regular Fallen was a real threat to her. So in the end I settled for a Frozen Orb and Hydra hybrid, which helped smooth out the runs a lot even though you sacrifice damage by going for a hybrid. So that's her starting stats and skill points. Now, let's get to the loot. Already on my 2nd run I found my first unique ring. It turned out to be a Ravenfrost with a very average roll. On the very next run I found a nicely rolled Nagel ring. Now this was a really nice find for this sorceress, but I unfortunately did not manage to capture the footage, but it looked something like this.
Die, maggot! Die!
On run number 23 I found a weapon from the Tal Rasha set.
This is the first perfect Talrash's weapon I found, rolling +2 to each mastery. On run number 60 I found a nice upgrade for the sorceress, a Tarn Helm. +1 to all skills and some nice magic find is exactly what I'm looking for at this point. Very nice roll too. On run 73 I found Vampire Gaze, the unique Grim Helm. A solid roll on a solid helm, very nice for mercenaries. On run 106 I found a Valkyrie Wing. Not the most commonly used helm, but one I really like for some reason. On run number 108 I find my first unique Grand Charm, which is of course Geed's Fortune. Not a very good roll, but it was the first for this character, so it was a nice upgrade. Then 20 runs later I found another one. I'm not complaining though, since this was a decent upgrade in Magic Find. And then just 4 runs later, I found yet another one.
Good to see you again.
I threw it out right away, but now while recording the voiceover, I noticed that it was almost perfect on the gold file. Oh well. Run 146 brought me another major upgrade. Trank's gloves with that sweet faster cast rate. The gloves together with a random faster cast rate amulet I found pushed me all the way to the 63% breakpoint. Calling this a major upgrade is an understatement. It was more like a heavy weight was lifted from my shoulders. Both teleporting to Andariel as well as the fight itself was so much smoother after this point. I will not be playing a sorceress that doesn't hit the 63% breakpoint for quite some time. With my newfound power on run 167 I found a Jalals. Now, Druid is probably my least played class, but if I decide to make one, this will be a nice item for him. On run 189 I find a nice belt for the sorceress, only it's not for this build. Another Geed's Fortune drops on run 197. This time it was just absolutely terrible. But on the next run I found a nice little upgrade in Gold Wrap. While it hurts to lose the nice resist and life from the current belt, I'm all about that magic find. On round 203 I found a pair of Titan's Revenge as well as a green amulet. The Titans turned out to be a pretty average roll, but the amulet turned out to be Talrash's. Nice. On round 213 it was time for another Geeds. One less magic find, but much better rolls on the other stats, so I kept this one. On round 219 I found Talrash's Helm. Usually not a very exciting drop, but this was actually my third piece from the set. Equipping the 3 Tal pieces would give me some nice minus to enemy fire resistance, but in the end I felt like I had to give up a bit too much, so I decided against it. On round 235 I find Triangle's Shield. This item has quite a strange roll range, and this time we end up on the bottom of it. On run 238 I find an Ethereal Templar coat which is Guardian Angel. The Ethereal version can be a nice mercenary armor if you're really looking to max out those resistances. Andariel drops a unique ring on run 249. Turns out to be a Nagel ring with 27 to magic find, a small upgrade but an upgrade nonetheless. On run 275 I had a really unexpected drop from the Fallen pack in Andariel's chambers, a Vex rune. That's a really nice find and puts me very close for some real nice upgrades. On run 305 I find the first noteworthy jewel. You're usually hoping for the other ruby kind, but this is still a really nice jewel. On round 329 I find an item that has eluded me for quite some time. This is actually the first G-phase I found since I started over, despite doing thousands of runs. The first pair of chance cards drops on run 348. As much as I would like the additional magic find, I'm not ready to give up the faster cast rate of my current gloves. On round 385 I find my first skiller with life. Just a shame it's a druid summoning one. On round 395 I find a unique pair of boots. Unfortunately, the rolls on these water walks are not very good. I found another interesting jewel on round 408, though I'm not really sure how useful this is. Haven't seen many of them though. On round 429 I found a good weapon for the summoning necromancer, Arm of King Leoric. An amulet drops on round 445. It's the Rising Sun, which would have been a really nice upgrade if I hadn't already found the Talrashas. A unique ring drops on round 486, and it's a Carrion Wind. On round 507 I get another shot at rolling Triangle's Wing. A better roll than the last one, but it's not the biggest difference in actual numbers. On round number 535 I find a nice belt for melee characters in String of Ears. And this turned out to have a really good roll. There were so many drops during the course of these runs. I've selected some highlights to show in this video, but here's a few clips to give you a taste of what most of the drops looked like. On round 541 I found a Manald. On round 547 another Manald. On 559 a Dwarf Star. And on 562 a Crescent Moon. Oh wow. But of course it wasn't all bad. On round 571 I found a pair of Alder's boots. Not that it's the rarest item, but it's certainly useful and this was a pretty good roll. On the next run it was time for another Geeds. Pretty similar stats to the one I already had. On round 581 I found a rare ring which turned out to be a pretty nice faster cast ring. On round 608 I found a Gull rune. Another unexpected rune drop. I don't know why, but I pick up and identify every bone snap I find. Well, I guess that's why. Finding perfect items is such a nice feeling even if it's just a trophy. More unexpected rune drops as I pick up a Flawless Topaz on round 613. This Pole rune was a really nice find, since together with the Vex from earlier it opens up some really strong gear options. Heart of the Oak would probably have been a stronger upgrade for this particular sorceress, but I went with Flickering Flame since I've never made one before and I really want one. Low roll on the Fire Resist aura, but a good roll on the minus to enemy fire resistance, so I was quite happy with this roll. On round 640 I found a unique ring with kind of a funny roll. Highest possible roll on the attack rating, but lowest possible roll on the dex. On round 653 I found a unique Bone Shield. The faster cast rate made me reconsider my gear options, but I couldn't find a configuration I really liked, so I held off on gear changes for now. On round 715 I found a Blade of Alibaba. This could have been a nice magic find weapon switch, but I ended up not using it. On round 723 I found another skeleton themed shield. Lidless Wall with its 20 faster cast rate as well as the +1 to all skills was a really nice find. I equipped the Lidless and swapped out my gloves for some chance cards for a decent gear upgrade. On round 746 I found a nice pair of boots in Gore Rider. On round 755 I found another pair of chance cards. A good roll, and since I was now using chance cards, this was an upgrade. On round 797 I found a nice small charm that's really close to being a home run. If only the max damage had been higher. On round 822 I found an item that I had been waiting for, maybe even expected, for quite a long time. I finally found a pair of Mage Fist. 14 runs later, another solid upgrade dropped. I was finally able to replace my gemmed breastplate with a Skalder's Ire. On run 853, it was time for the last Gid's fortune of these runs.
Greetings!
It turned out to be an all-around very good roll. On run 865, I had 3 rings from the same drop. That was of course quite surprising, but the unique was unfortunately only a Manalt. More unexpected ring drops started on run 936 when I found a Ravenfrost. That's not so surprising, but on the very next run I found another Ravenfrost. I think this is the first time I've ever found 2 of the same unique 2 runs in a row. Another unique ring on run 970. This turned out to be a 28% Nagel ring, getting in some small upgrades at the end of the runs. On run 980 I found a High Lord's Wrath. On run 985 I found another Nagel ring with a high roll. And on run 986 I found another High Lords. We're closing in on the end of the runs, but there was still a major upgrade waiting for me. On run 988 I found the first Talrasha's belt. The reason this was so significant was that it let me equip 3 pieces of Talrasha without using the helm. This finally unlocked the nice minus to enemy fire resist on the wand, as well as pushing me over 300 total magic find. On run 999, Andariel sent me off with a final unique ring. Of course, it was just a Manald. Now let's take a look at the final stats and gear after the 1000 runs. All things considered, I think this project was very successful. So is Andariel worth it? Well, it depends. While I'm quite happy with the result of these runs, I do believe on average you will get better gear faster on a self-found character by running Mephisto if you can handle it. But if you feel like it, Andariel is definitely a solid magic find target. I want a torch. You know, a Hellfire torch. The ridiculously overpowered unique large charm. While Diablo 2 has no shortage of overpowered or even game-breaking items, this doesn't even take up a gear slot. It's the upside of a strong endgame item at the cost of 5% of your inventory space. So basically every character needs one or they are missing out on free power, so of course I want one. Well actually, I really want a torch for each class. Or I guess, to ensure good rolls and minimize the need for gear swapping between characters of the same class, I need a lot of torches. But right now I don't have any torches, just a big torch-sized hole in my inventory. It's time to do something about that. Now I play single player. I never go online in Diablo 2, except sometimes to, you know. That means that I have to do everything required to get a torch myself. To get the torch, I need to defeat several different bosses located behind several different portals. But let's start from the beginning by farming a bunch of keys. And the first target on my key running hit list is
The Countess, who once bathed in the rejuvenating blood of 100 virgins.
I'm running with a Nova Sorceress that hits the 105% FCR breakpoint and carries 218% magic find. She's accompanied by a Holy Freeze mercenary and they both have decent but not top shelf end gear. A quick overview of their gear is playing on screen now. This video tries to highlight what you can expect from doing 100 key runs, but on run number 3, something absolutely unexpected dropped. A champion ghost in the Countess Chamber dropped a freaking Jarun. Talk about a strong start to the runs. By the way, how terrifying would it have been if I accidentally had socketed Jarun into the socketed armor in my inventory. Only 2 runs later, on run number 5, I find a Mal rune. It of course pales in comparison, but it was still a nice find because it was the last rune I was missing for Call to Arms. So I decided to roll one right away. Only 2 to battle orders is a bit unfortunate, but since it was my first, I was still happy. On run number 23, yet another Mal rune drops. Then nothing interesting happened for a while, but towards the end of the runs, the tower got terrorized and I found a Sundering Charm. Quite a low roll, but still a nice find. The first unique ring of the runs drops on run 95. Unfortunately, it's just a Manald. The 100 runs resulted in 10 keys of terror. By the way, the runs were done on a player 3 settings in single player. Next we're off to one of the strangest areas in the game, where we find the keeper of the next key, the Summoner. This key is by far my least favorite to run, but a goblin's gotta do what a goblin's gotta do. I have my first interesting non-key drop on run 45 when a pair of rare boots drop. These are actually quite nice and I end up equipping them right away. On run 54 of the Summoner, the second unique ring drops. It also happens to be our second Manald. On the final Summoner run, he drops both a set and a unique item. They're nothing special, but it's so rare to get a double drop from him, I felt like including it. 100 Summoner runs resulted in 12 keys of hate. That's 2 out of 3 of the key bosses farmed. And the last one, the keeper of the key of destruction, is Nil Attack. He can be a very dangerous target to farm thanks to his ability to cast Corpse Explosion. The common ways around this is to either keep your distance, equip a source of slain monsters rest in peace, or kill him without creating a single body for him to blow up. Well, this sorceress can't do any of those, and I don't have a Nature's Peace ring, so she's in a tough spot. Or well, so I thought. Without a source of slain monsters rest in peace, I assumed I would have no chance against him with a Nova sorceress that needs to get up close and personal. Before even attempting a single run, I had already created a plan for how to overcome this problem, and I had even started writing the outline for a script for a little side story. Our hero sorceress was gonna go up against Nil Attack, but fail brutally time and time again, until a mysterious hero appeared to aid her, and together they would defeat the evil necromancer. But it turns out I overestimated how dangerous Nil Attack is, or maybe I underestimated how strong my Sork is, because she does the runs just fine without any gear changes or help needed. Just teleport into the middle of his plateau, static a few times, and then Nova is strong enough to finish him off before he's able to do much. And thanks to the damage being high enough, he is often stunned a few times so he can't teleport around too much. So that's a bit of an anti-climax, but hey, let's take a look at some things I found while farming him. On run number 9, I found an ethereal cryptic X. I was really hoping for 4 sockets here, since my own mercenary is still using a non-ethereal weapon for his rune word. But unfortunately, no luck this time. While Nil Attack was pretty good at dropping keys, he was very bad at dropping anything else. But on run 75, he dropped a green war belt. Nothing too special, but at least the IK belt is a decent item. But I mostly included this because I forgot to hit record again after saving this footage, so I didn't get any footage of my next drop, a rainbow facet. I'm actually looking to make this a fire sorceress in the near future, so despite the mediocre roll, it was a nice drop. On run number 100, Nil Attack was kind enough to drop a final key, as well as an item I've never seen before. Looks kinda rare if you ask me. So with those runs finished, the total tally comes out to 10 keys of terror, 12 keys of hate, and 13 keys of destruction. That's a bit more than what you could expect on average, but nothing too unreasonable given the small sample size of just 100 runs and each boss having about a 10% chance to drop a key, depending on the player settings.
How much does Magic Find really matter? Well, let's find out. In this video I'm going to be doing 100 Mephisto runs with 0, 100, 250 and finally 500% Magic Find. Then I'll compare how many set and unique items I find in each set of runs. Let's get into it. I'll be playing as a Blizzard sorceress, and to hit 0% I just removed all the Magic Find gear from what she was already using and replaced it as good as I could. It can actually be a bit tricky to hit 0% MF as a caster, since a lot of good caster gear comes with some built-in MF already, but this is what I managed to assemble. And as you can see, the damage is still pretty good and I managed to hit the 105 faster cast breakpoint for teleporting. To make things as consistent as possible, I ignored every other monster and only counted drops from Mephisto himself. The first decent drop came on run number 6, a pair of chance cards. A pretty decent roll too, but of course I'm trying to stay at 0 MF for now. While not a set or unique, on run number 20 I found a skiller. Unfortunately, it was one of the less useful ones. On run number 39, the first unique ring dropped. Hopes were high as always, but unfortunately this was just a Manald. And in case you were wondering, the coronet was nothing either. Only 4 runs later I had another shot at a unique ring. This time it was a Ravenfrost, and this is actually one of the better rolls I have found in single player. As you would expect from running 0% Magic Find, I wasn't swimming in drops. On run number 79 I had one of only 3 double drops, and I had no triple drops at all. Perhaps the best drop of the first 100 runs came on run number 95. A Storm Shield. The first unique amulet dropped on run number 99. The Rising Sun. On run number 100 I found nothing, but let's go ahead and take a look at the total for the first 100 runs with 0 Magic Find. I found 15 set items and 19 uniques, for a total of 34 items, which equals to 1 set or unique item every 3 runs. That's not very impressive for 100 runs, but it's kind of expected when you're running with literally 0 Magic Find. With a baseline established, let's move on to 100 runs with 100% increased Magic Find. To achieve this, I swapped out my wand for the Oculus. I kept the rest of my gear pretty much the same to get on with the runs as fast as possible. The rest of the Magic Find I made up for in my charms. Going from 0 to 100 MF made a huge difference, and I found a lot more items in this set of runs. But before we move on to the highlights, please give this video a like to keep Mephisto happy and generous with his drops. On the 5th run with 100 Magic Find, Mephisto opened strong by dropping a Skulder's Ire, which is one of my favorite items to find early on if I'm gearing up a new character. On the 33rd run I found 2 set amulets in the same drop, which I thought was pretty unusual. There aren't really any good set amulets to hope for apart from Talrashas though, and this time I unfortunately didn't get one. To be honest, I didn't find much interesting for a long time during this set of runs, even if I did find a lot more uniques in total. But I guess that's the name of the game if you're dealing with Diablo 2 loot RNG. But there were some interesting drops in the later runs, starting with a unique ring on run number 85. Well, at this point I was just happy to get to identify something. On run number 90 I found a pair of ethereal hotspurs which I thought was pretty cool. They're not very useful, but they're quite rare, being that hotspurs are rare on their own and being ethereal on top of that. So, time to summarize the 100 runs with 100% Magic Find. I ended up finding 40 set items and 41 uniques, for a total of 81 drops. That's a very noticeable increase from the runs with 0% Magic Find, which highlights how impactful getting that first bit of increased Magic Find really is. Now let's move up to 250% Magic Find. To achieve this, I went with a setup that looks very similar to what my sorceress usually wears outside of this experiment. The main difference from earlier is that now I used 3 pieces from the Talrasha set, including the armor, for a massive boost to my Magic Find. I chose 250% because that's around where I feel I can usually get to relatively easy on a new Magic Find character without needing very rare or expensive gear. Additionally, I also see the 200 to 300% range thrown around as a recommendation to aim for fairly often when advice is given online, so I thought it would be an interesting data point. There wasn't much highlight worthy, but on run 21 I found Alder's Helm. It was a very low roll, but it was the start of an interesting set of drops. During these 100 runs I found not 1, not 2, but 3 Alder's weapons, and they all rolled with 3 sockets too. Not that I know what I would ever do with 3 of them. Now let's back up a bit. 4 runs after I found the Alder's Helm, I also found IK Helm on run 25. And with 37% Magic Find, it was a pretty good roll. 30 runs in, a unique ring dropped. This time it was a Carrion Wind. 12 runs after the first one, another IK Helm dropped, and this time it was a slightly worse roll. About halfway through these runs, something truly exciting dropped for the first time in a while. A Rainbow Facet. It was a -5 +4 poison facet, and I found quite a few of these lately, so I guess it's time to make a poison based character. Just a few runs later I found the Paladin Shield, Herald of Saccharum. While I'm not the biggest fan of this shield, or the Paladin class in general, you can't deny that this is a powerful item. And about 30 runs later I found another shield, the second Storm Shield of the runs.
The Storm Shield has great physical damage reduction, and to go along with that, about 10 runs later I found a Verdungus. The roll is a bit all over the place though. The loot for the 100 runs with 250% magic find ended up being 43 set items and 67 uniques, for a total of 110 drops. Again, it was a noticeable increase compared to the previous set of runs, but you can see the diminishing returns of increased magic find starting to kick in. Now let's move on to the final set of runs. For the last 100 runs I was running with 500% magic find. Now I don't have all the best gear available to me, so when going for 500 I had to start making some compromises with my gear, and I noticed a drop in power as well as run speed. My blizzard damage fell to about 5k and I couldn't hit the 105 faster cast rate breakpoint anymore. Still, this should be more than enough to make short work of Mephisto. And the last set of runs started out exactly as the first, with a pair of chance cards, dropping on the 6th run. And would you look at that, they rolled perfectly, what a nice surprise. I have found many chance cards with 35 plus MF, but this is actually my first pair in Resurrected that has rolled a perfect 40. Of course I couldn't put them on straight away, but I'm still very happy with this find. My good mood from that run carried me all the way to the 42nd run when I found a unique ring. The good mood was soon wiped away since it was just a dwarf star. And only 4 rounds after that I found a Shaco. To me, finding a Shaco is always a nice feeling, but this character is in single player, so it's not very useful. So to all my single player or cell phone players out there, how do you feel about finding Shacos or other really good items but that you already have a few copies of? I also found a Jade Talon, which is something I typically don't include in the highlights, but this is probably the best roll I have ever found, so I thought I'd include it. On the 67th run, I found the first set of unique javelins in this experiment. It was a pair of Thunderstrokes, but unfortunately it was a poor roll. A unique tiara dropped on run 75. That's Kira's Guardian, but unfortunately the all resist roll was quite low. On run 82 I found an item that I quite like, but I haven't found in a long time. The Rib Cracker. And this one rolled really well, only 3% of perfect. Finding items like this really makes me wanna put them to use right away, but I'm not done with the experiment yet, so that'll have to wait. So we're just about done with the runs, but before I summarize everything, Mephisto had a nice little surprise for me on the very last run. A unique spiderweb sash, the best caster belt in the game, Arachnid Mesh. So with that little cherry on top of the 100 runs with 500% magic find, the total comes out to 45 sets and 76 uniques for a total of 121 items. And if I summarize everything in one table for comparison, it looks like this. You are free to interpret the data however you like, but I would focus on the trend and the relation between the different groups of runs rather than any specific number. To me, the biggest takeaways are that the first bit of magic find you can equip on your character will help a lot in finding more gear. And secondly, what people have been saying to me online all these years about the diminishing return of magic find is true. Me and my fellow Diablo tuber the Nuclear Rabbit challenged each other to a 12-hour magic find race farming level 85 areas in hell to see who could get the best loot, but there is a twist. To spice it up we decided that we both had to wear a complete set of gear, and since it was supposed to be a handicap rather than a buff, we excluded the 7 elite class specific sets and let the wheel decide our fate. I rolled the Arctic gear set, which I guess is not the best nor the worst, but I was just glad that the wheel stopped before reaching the Berserker set, because that would have been a real pain. The Arctic set have some alright stats for a low level set, and it even has some magic find, but the main problem I see is that it takes up several valuable gear slots like the weapon slot and the glove slot. My competitor rolled the Husaru set, and while it has some pretty bad stats, with the only really good one being the cannot be frozen as a set bonus, it at least only takes up 3 gear slots in total. I'd say the sets we rolled were pretty even when it comes to power level, which of course was good for the competition. The Nuclear Rabbit picked the Barbarian while I chose to go with the Amazon using Freezing Arrow. Who will find the best loot and be crowned the winner of this competition? Let's find out. I quite like the Amazon and the Boazon in particular, and the armor from the Arctic set is also the very first set item that I remember finding over 20 years ago in the original Diablo 2, so I was actually kind of excited to play this character. Here's a quick overview of my character and my full gear setup. The set bow is definitely a weak weapon, especially considering how many +2 skills you could get from using another bow, but it does give a pretty decent amount of attack rating, which is at least something. It's socketed with a shale rune for the increased attack speed. I'll also mention the complete set bonuses now, which are not that many or that great, but the cold damage and the cannot be frozen are pretty nice for sure. Then the set armor, which has some minor resistances but not much else. It's socketed with a jewel with 15% attack speed. The set gloves are quite weak compared to other options, especially considering even magical gloves can spawn with up to 3 extra bow and crossbow skills, but it at least has 10% attack speed, which is helpful. The belt gives a good amount of cold resist and a nice chunk of magic find as a set bonus. All in all, the set could definitely be worse, but it's not great either, and I didn't think about it until I started gearing her, but the set really takes up some rough item slots where she could have had some great options otherwise. And then to complement the set, I'm first wearing a Shaco socketed with a perfect topaz for some much needed +2 skills, as well as a decent chunk of magic find. The life and especially the mana is also a welcome bonus. For a necklace I'm wearing a High Lord's Wrath for an extra skill point and increased attack speed. The lightning resist is also nice because of where I will be farming. For rings I'm wearing 2 Nagel rings for the extra magic find. I would have loved to trade in the MF for another skill point, but I have not found a single Soy or BK wedding band since Resurrected came out, despite doing thousands of runs. And finally, for my boots I'm wearing a nice pair of War Travelers for the extra magic find. My charms were a Geed's Fortune, 5 bow and crossbow skillers and some magic find small charms. I forgot to show it for the video, but on my weapon switch I was carrying a Harmony runeword in a longbow, and I used it just for the Vigor Aura to run faster in town and between fights. My resistances were looking really bad, but I did not expect that to be a big issue where I was planning on farming. And Freezing Arrow also freezes enemies, unexpected I know, so I should be able to do runs rather safely even with low resistances. My magic find ended up being just shy of 300, which was definitely an okay amount. My listed damage per shot wasn't looking too impressive, but I had decent attack speed, so I would hopefully be able to clear things decently fast. I wasn't sure exactly what to do with the remaining skill points after maxing out Freezing Arrow and its damage synergy, so I spread them out between Pierce and Penetrate with a few points into Valkyrie. I later ended up maxing out both Pierce and Penetrate, even though the returns on Pierce were pretty small, because I didn't know what else to do with the skill points. In hindsight, I could have invested some in a secondary attack, because I did end up struggling somewhat against cold immune enemies. I decided to run the ancient tunnels underneath the Lost City in Act 2. The main reason is that there are no naturally cold immune monsters in the area, and they are also fairly easy for a level 85 area, though I sometimes find that the layout of the map can be a bit annoying to navigate, at least without teleport, but I decided to start here anyway. The Freezing Arrow Boazon is a lot of fun to play, and the ancient tunnel fit her well. I could blast most monsters down in a few seconds, and the splash damage of Freezing Arrow is deceptively big. I would have liked to clear enemies in a few less shots, but there wasn't much I could do about that now. And what was I expecting? I was wearing the full Arctic set after all. The first few runs took a while to do as I was settling into the runs and getting used to the map, and I also didn't find anything noteworthy. I found a Monarch of Deflecting on run 4, and it kind of feels like it's close to being a jeweler's Monarch of Deflecting, but in reality it's not really. But on run number 8 I kicked things off for real with a Lem rune. This is the lowest rune I consider a decently interesting drop, but I was not complaining about any drops at this point. On run 15 I found a pretty good base item for rune words. This Sacred Torch with 4 default to all resistances could become a very nice spirit shield for a paladin. On run 17 I found a green troll belt, which is the belt from the Trank set. It's a pretty unique item in that it's a belt with cannot be frozen on it. Otherwise it's not a very commonly used item, but it is decently rare, and it's also in the second highest treasure class. I picked up an Immortal King Stone Crusher on run 24, which rolled 1% off perfect on the crushing blow. And on run 26 I found a Heart Carver. This isn't anything special in terms of either usefulness or rarity, but it reminded me of how my competitor had the skill find item to increase the amount of drops he would get. So after finding this I tried to pick up the pace even more. I then had a string of pretty weird drops, starting with this unique cedar bow on run 33. The Kuko Shakaku is a really cool and unique bow, and can be very useful on a Boazon or a ranged sorceress using enchant. It's also an item that I just really like. And then a couple of drops that were more funny than exciting. On run 36 I found a green short warbow, which is of course the bow from the Arctic set that I was already wearing. And then 12 runs later I found another one. I guess I have a couple of spare ones if anything happens to the one I'm wearing, but bows can't even break, so I don't know what I'm supposed to do with these. Shortly after, I had run the ancient tunnel for 3 hours total, and we had decided to check in with each other every 3 hours to compare our progress. I felt like my start had been rather slow, but at least some decently rare items had dropped, and the Paladin shield might even be used on a character in the future. Meanwhile, the Nuclear Rabbit had been cleaning out the pits, and he had found some pretty good loot with the Titan's Revenge and Tal Rasha's armor. And while it's not the most popular item, the Spirit Keeper is a pretty rare find. We hadn't exactly figured out how we should score the competition yet, but I think it was fair to say that he was ahead at this point, but not by that much, and a few lucky drops could easily flip the scales in my favor. Before continuing, I stopped and reconsidered my plan for a little while. I was not very happy with my run so far. Even with a decent map, it just felt like the runs took a little bit too long to do, a little over 3 minutes on average. For the next set of runs I decided to try my luck in the Stony Tomb instead. It's kind of similar to the ancient tunnels in both how it looks and what types of enemy spawns there. The reason I was interested was that there is a second level to the tomb, and on average you'll find a few more elite enemies in total. It also has a simpler map layout, which makes it easier to make sure you haven't missed any enemies. On the negative side, there is a special boss on the second level which always spawns immune to cold, and while my mercenary surely would be able to handle that one for me, it would take some additional time on every round. I was at least willing to give it a try though. My first drop in the Stony Tomb was a green-spired helm, which is Ondal's Almighty. Not a great item, but decently rare, so it should get me some score for the competition. On run 69 I was teased with a rare unearthed wand. I am still waiting for my first ever Death's Web, but it looks like I have to continue to wait for now. And later on the same run I found the helm from the Talrasha set. 5 runs later, on run 74, I found more decent elite set pieces with the gloves from the Immortal King set. I hadn't gotten a great start with what items dropped, but on run 84 my score got a nice boost. First I found Mavina's armor, and then on the same run in the last room before exiting I found a unique Lich wand. I didn't know what this was off the top of my head, but it turned out to be Bone Shade, 2 fairly rare items in the same run. This was a boost to my morale, and it also marked a bit of a turning point as the drops improved a bit from here. And just before finishing the run I also found a small charm with a perfect plus 20 to life, although no other stats. Just 2 runs later, I found a unique Grand Charm, and since I wasn't in a terror zone, it could only be Geed's Fortune, but I still tried picking it up despite already carrying one in my inventory. The roll was pretty low, but it was at least something interesting to identify. I picked up a lot of druid pelts and other class-specific items to check for good +2 skills rolls. My eyes are pretty much trained to just scan for 3s on these kinds of items at this point, so I was a bit tricked by this druid pelt spawning with +3 to light radius and +30 to attack rating, tricking my brain into excitement for a fraction of a second before it registered what it was that I rolled +3. On run 91 I found a pretty cool mercenary weapon. Kelpie Snare has a whopping 75% slows target, which really is a huge amount. This can really make bosses much safer, but in reality I don't think I have ever gotten much use out of it. On run 103 I found perhaps the most actually useful item yet, with these unique javelins. Titan's Revenge is a great weapon for the Javason, and while the rolls aren't the most important on this item, this one rolled pretty decently. I was closing in on the 6-hour mark, but I had one more drop on run 107 with the weapon from the Alder set. For my second batch I got a better haul than in the first one, especially if the usefulness of the items are considered. The Nuclear Rabbit had a really unlucky second round in the pits, scoring only a pair of Sandstorm Trek and the Cat's Eye. If we weren't competing I would almost have felt bad for him, but the pendulum of luck swings both ways, as you will see later in the video. Now I had taken the lead in the competition, which of course felt nice, but none of us had gotten anything super cool or rare yet, so it was still anyone's game. I decided to stick with the Stony Tomb for my third leg of the competition and headed straight back to farming. After a few runs of nothing, I had another run with decent double drops, Payback's Glory and another Trank Spell, 2 drops with Treasure Class 84 in the same run, which was pretty cool and would translate to a decent score for the competition. On run 121 I found a Grand Matron bow with +3 skills and 4 open sockets. This is maybe not that special and I wouldn't include it in the scoring, but I've been looking for an elite Amazon bow with 4 sockets and 3 skills for quite some time. Now I just have to make sure to put it to use and not let it become one of those items that I look for a long time and then it just ends up gathering virtual dust on a mule. Another double drop on run 134. First I found a green armor in Haemosu's Adamant, which barely qualifies on its own, but later on the same run I also found Hotspur. I'm not sure if it's just luck or if I'm overestimating the rarity of these, but I thought they were kind of rare since they are of the lowest treasure class, which ironically becomes kind of rare, but I've been finding quite a few of these. On the very next run I had a drop that made me pause my runs and scratch my head. After defeating the Creeping Feature mini-boss, which is the elite enemy who always spawns on level 2 by the way, I found these rare boots. I first saw some nice stats, but not enough resistances to really make me perk up in my chair. But then I saw it. Lightning damage. What? Maybe I'm not the most observant, but I can't remember ever seeing elemental damage on a pair of rare boots. My first reaction was that the item must have bugged out somehow, but after looking through the full list of possible stats online, it turns out that lightning damage can spawn on rare boots, but I guess it's quite rare. I found my third Arctic's bow, and at this point it was just ridiculous, but the worst part is that it's not even over yet. And before I hit the next checkpoint, I found another copy of the armor from the Mavina set on run 140. My third batch didn't give me much useful, but I did find even more decently rare set items from the higher treasure classes, so at least I kept adding to my score. Checking in with the Nuclear Rabbit, his drops seemed to have improved quite a bit compared to the second round, with a bunch of decent set items, several good unique belts including Thunder Gods, a couple of Verdungos and a Razor Tail. And then, a what? When he sent me this clip the first time, I honestly was so focused on all the loot that I didn't see the freaking bear rune until he started circling around it. What a drop to get in a farming race like this. I congratulated him on the amazing find, but I only meant it 50% because this meant I was really behind in the competition at this point. I was considering if there would be any other option that could be better than the Stony Tomb. I didn't really think I could handle farming the Chaos Sanctuary or Bale very efficiently with this character, so I rubbed my lucky charms, said prayer to the loot gods, and headed back to the Stony Tomb for the final round, and the loot really came rolling in for me on the fourth set of runs. The drop started off on run 151 when I found Lava Gout, a pretty unique pair of gloves with the chance to cast the enchant spell. They have increased attack speed too, but they are a bit lacking in total stats to be really good, and if you're really desperate for the buff, there's other ways to get that without using these gloves. A cool change could be to replace the freeze duration reduction with straight up cannot be frozen. But here I go again, getting my hopes up for item changes, which I occasionally do ever since they randomly removed the knockback from one of the Bull Catho set swords. Then I looted an item that I had not found previously in Resurrected. On run 162 I found a unique Elder Staff. That is Ondal's Wisdom, a decent item for sure, though it has fallen out of favor being a two-handed caster weapon in a world where the Spirit Shield exists, but it has a very unique stat with the plus 5% increased experience gain. I'm not sure it's worth carrying this around for that purpose, but it was an item I was happy to find regardless. Then on run 165 I found a Bloodletter Gladius. I quite like this item on the rare occasion that I play with a barbarian using items from the shared stash. 4 runs later, on run 169, I found a unique Barb Helm. Ariat's face is the more useful one, but this was a decently rare find. The rolls on this makes it pretty random, and I got 2s across the board, decent for score at least. Lots of drops that I have stuff to say about in this set of runs, and the next one was no different. On run 172 I found the unique bow Witchwild String, a pretty cool item with the 2 sockets, the chance to cast amplify damage, and the scaling deadly strike, basically giving you 2 ways of doubling your damage. It's just a shame that the base damage isn't higher, so it gets outclassed by much else, especially now that you can make the Insight rune word in bows too. Still, an item that I'm quite fond of personally. Then 10 runs later, on run 182, I found my first Skiller Charm, and it was a good one too, giving +1 to lightning skills for the sorceress. I was really happy with this, as my Skiller collection has a lot of holes to fill, and this is certainly a strong one. Then on the next run I had a run with multiple drops, and 3 of them this time. It started off with some green battle boots, which is the boots from the older set. The fire resist roll could be higher, but these are some pretty good boots. Then shortly after I found a unique amulet. This was just a crescent moon, and I momentarily forgot about the competition, so I threw this back on the ground. And then finally I found a gold rep, which is kind of underrated in my opinion. It's mostly wanted for the magic find, but getting 10% attack speed on a belt is very rare and can be really useful for some characters. 2 runs later I found Mavina's gloves, and 3 runs after that another unique amulet. This one was a Saracen's Chance, which I don't think I have ever used, but I always find identifying unique amulets exciting. On the next run I found another elite set. This one is from the Natalia set, and it rolled only 1 out of 3 sockets. I personally really dislike items that have a variable roll on +2 skills or the number of sockets, because it's really hard to feel good about getting anything but the max roll on such a significant stat. A few not so exciting drops in a row, but that was about to change. On run 192 I found a unique sword. This can be either the cool but not too exciting lightsaber, or it can be the much more rare Azure Wrath, and I was happy to see it was the latter, because this is as far as I remember the first one I have found in Resurrected. A very cool sword if you ask me, and after playing a fast shooting Boazon who has to worry about arrows every few runs, I can really appreciate that the faceplate doesn't have to be repaired. As I was nearing the end of my 4th and final set of runs, I had been making good progress, but not really anything to compete with the Nuclear Rabbit's Bear rune. I did have 2 more drops coming though, with the first one coming on run 199. My 4th Arctic's bow. What is even going on here? Diablo 2's loot RNG can lead to some funny moments sometimes. I don't have any more comments, I'm just stunned. And with just a few minutes left on the timer, on run 201 in the 2nd level of the tomb, I spotted an orange flash. Could this be the high rune I needed to save me? Well, it was a rune used in the Enigma rune word just like the bear rune, but it was unfortunately just an Ith. And with that the race was over. I found some pretty cool items, but not very many that I see myself actually using in the future, which was a bit of a bummer, but I guess such is the life of a Diablo 2 single player magic find grinder. The drop that I was the most happy with were probably the Ondal's Wisdom Staff, since that's a first for me in Resurrected, and I could see myself using that on a weapon switch if I ever decide to go for level 99 at some point. And then the Lightning Skiller for the Sorceress, as that is certainly being put to use at some point. And of course, the 4 extra copies of the bow from the Arctic set. So what about the race? Well, we did have a scoring system to rate our drops, and even without the Baron I still think the Nuclear Rabbit won this race, but with the Baron it was not even close. Congratulations and good grind.
He can drop almost everything, but he never drops anything. That's my short summary of Pindleskin, the infamous undead super unique that is always hanging out at the same spot beyond the red portal in the town of Act 5. Thanks to his fixed starting position and the short travel distance, as well as being able to drop almost every unique item in the game, he has earned his spot as a main magic find target in Diablo 2. However, he also catches a lot of flack from frustrated players that complain that he doesn't drop anything. And to be honest, if you're used to the warm comfort of Mephisto, dropping at least something of set or unique rarity every other run, you're in for a rude awakening with Pindleskin. You have to be able to endure the inevitable dry spells and drops if you want to run him. So, is he worth the trouble? Well, Pindle has always been a mixed bag for me, and I have never really formed a strong opinion about him, so I decided to give him a real go and run him 1000 times to see if he's worth it. Let's go! On run number 3 I found a Skiller Grand Charm. A Poison and Bone Skiller for the Necromancer. I'm running with a Blizzard Sorceress with an Act 2 Mercenary. We both have pretty decent but not the absolute best gear. I'm running on player 7 settings since Blizzard finishes him off quickly enough, and I was looking to get some experience while I was at it. However, if I were to redo this, I would lower the player setting in favor of faster runs. On run number 6 I found this unique Necromancer offhand that I never knew how to pronounce. The Homunculus? Anyway, it rolled really high on the ED, not that it really matters. Then on the very next run I found Talrasha's armor. This is not the Pindleskin I remember. He really lured me in with some great drops in the early runs to get me hooked, but I had my suspicion that this was probably not gonna be representative of the many runs to come. And boy was I right. 38 runs later, on run 45, we got our next interesting drop. A nice pair of rare boots that are really close to being great. Triple resistances, faster run walk and magic find. It's just a shame that some of the rolls are a bit low. Still a pretty exciting find. Another rare on run 76, and this time it's an amulet. At the moment it dropped, I thought it was really close to being great, but in hindsight, maybe it's missing a bit too much. I found a Griswold's armor on run 78. This is not a particularly interesting drop, but I wasn't finding much at this point, so I was just happy to find something. On run number 86, I found a Rune Master. I personally find this item very interesting due to the high number of sockets, and we got 5 on this one, but I have never found a use for them. On run 131, I found another Griswold's armor. That's enough now, Pindleskin, thank you. On run 141, I found another class set piece. This time something a bit more useful, Talrasha's Helm. After that, it was time for my first real unlucky streak, 120 runs without anything worth noting. The dry spell was then broken by something just barely worth noting. Altar's Weapon, and unfortunately it only rolled 2 sockets. On run 270 I found another class set piece. This time it was the helm from the Assassin set, Natalia's Totem. I had an absolutely amazing drop on run 339. Yep, that's the unique Hydra bow, Wind Force. I can't believe I found one so early on. This is such a classic Diablo 2 item, and it's so rare and so hard to get your hands on one, especially if you play single player with no trading. And the perfect roll on the mana leech to top it off, and Boazons are one of my favorite builds in the entire game, and wait, hold on, pause the Pindle runs. I'm gonna go and level a Boazon right now.
Greetings, stranger. greetings, stranger. Greetings.
Man, that bow feels awesome. I only played with it a little bit so far, but the wind force just hits differently. Oh well, now where were we? Right, back to the Pindle runs. On run 353 I found a unique troll nest, the Headhunter's Glory. We managed to get the max number of sockets, but to me this is one of those cool items that I've just never found a use for. A pair of Sandstorm Trek drops on run 381. On run 420 it's time for some more alders, this time it's the Helm. After enduring another 100 run dry spell, we found a Gladiator's Bane on run 526. A very strong defensive armor, not too commonly used, but if it's ethereal it can be a great merc armor. Really finding a lot of class set pieces. Next up is Natalia's boots. Now that's a bad roll. I find a unique ring on run 555. I know 777s are supposed to be a lucky number, but maybe 555s can be a minor lucky number. Doesn't seem to be my lucky numbers. On the very next run I find the unique bone knife, Wizard Spike. This used to be my favorite item in the game back in the day. Just look at all that utility. On run 562 I get a rare Pindle double drop. Mavina's gloves, but more importantly, Gore Riders, a really nice pair of boots. On the next run I found Bloodraven's Charge. I think this is supposed to be a pretty rare item, but I've been finding a lot of these lately. Too bad it's a pretty bad item. On run 581 I found what I thought to be a pretty decent Mana Leech ring. It's nothing crazy, so it might be borderline to include in a drop video, but at least I have a Barbarian that will get great use out of this. On run 581 I was so busy admiring my mercenary's gear that I almost missed a drop. But luckily I spotted the Demon Horn's edge lurking at the bottom of the screen. On run 678, another unlucky streak of almost 100 runs were broken with a pair of Mage Fists. Not that the roll itself is important, but it's a great feeling to find perfectly rolled items. On run 720 I found a really rare item. Well, from Pindle itself I found nothing, but after the run I decided to go to town and gamble away some gold. And I gambled a metal grid. This thing is rare, so it was pretty cool to gamble one. I wonder what Iron Golem shenanigans I might get up to. Please leave a comment if you have a reasonably priced suggestion. The Green Avenger Guard for the Immortal King set drops on run 772. There haven't been much in the way of jewelry, but on run 784 a unique ring drops. But let's not get too excited. I found a really nice item on run 798. And no, it's not the unique war staff I'm talking about, but the small charm. With 15 to life and 11 cold resist, this is gonna be a really useful item to a lot of characters. But after this, things got really rough. I only found 2 more noteworthy items in the last 200 runs. The first of them though, on run 841, is quite a nice one. Draco's Grasp, and apart from the life leech, it was a really good roll. The last item I'll include is not a unique, but a base item with potential. An ethereal Great Poleaxe. It would be awesome to get the 4 sockets to finish on a high note, but it just wasn't meant to be. So that concludes 1000 Pindle runs. Was it worth it? Well, while I'm not swimming in good loot, I certainly did pick up some good items, and it's really hard to complain since I found the wind force. The problem is that Pindle is kind of boring to run, and I had more than one dry spell where he would not drop anything remotely interesting for over 100 runs, which can be very demotivating. So, do I recommend running him? For most people, no, not really. There are many other places I would rather farm for uniques, especially now that we have terror zones in the game. But I do think there's a place for him if you're the type of person who likes to grind out some mindless runs while watching TV or YouTube and want to play on autopilot. Or if you're an absolute loot goblin who doesn't care about fun anymore and just wants to spin the RNG slot machine that is Diablo 2 item drops every 30 seconds for the tiny chance of hitting the jackpot. If you haven't had enough already, here's another grindy loot fest for you to watch. Mephisto, Mephisto. Whenever someone complains about their gear or asks where to start their magic finding journey, the common answer always seems to be Mephisto. And for good reason. He's reasonably close to a waypoint, he can be cheesed so even weak characters can reliably run him, and he frequently drops both set and unique items, making him a very attractive early magic find target. I recently did a complete restart in Diablo 2 and decided to put Mephisto to the test. I wanted to see just how geared you could get by running only Mephisto. So starting with some very bare bones magic find gear, I ran Mephisto 1000 times, and he really dropped some good gear. Before we get into the drops, let me just give a quick rundown of our starting character. Skill wise, it's your standard cookie cutter blizzard sorceress, nothing new, nothing fancy, it's just the best Mephisto runner in my opinion. Gear wise, she's using a spirit sword for some skills, faster cast rate and some other good stats. In the other hand, she's using an Ancient's Pledge runeword to help with her terrible resistances. Headgear is a magical circlet with +1 to skills and some added energy. The body armor is a gothic plate with 4 perfect topazes in it for a massive boost to magic find. The belt is just a random belt with 4 potion slots and a small boost to life. Magical gloves of fortune and magical boots of luck for even more magic find. In case you didn't know, both of these items can be shopped from vendors in town pretty easily, though you might have to spend some time in order to find high rolls like these. For jewelry, she's wearing 1 amulet and 1 ring with magic find and 1 ring with faster cast rate. While questing through the game, she was fortunate enough to find a Blade of Alibaba, which is wearing on her weapon switch, together with a Rhyme runeword. In summary, her gear is all magic find and very little else. Her magic find sits at just over 200 on the main gear and just over 300 on her weapon switch, which is of course very solid for just getting started. Now let's get into the juicy part, the loot. Only 4 runs in, I found my first useful item. A gold wrap belt. Maybe not the rarest or most powerful, but it was a nice motivation finding an upgrade for the character so early. Then, just 12 runs in, I had an unbelievable drop. An Ohm rune. I couldn't believe it, I've never seen Mephisto drop a rune this high, so needless to say, I was super excited. On round 16, the first unique ring dropped. A Ravenfrost. Nice to have one, but kind of a mediocre roll. On run 24 I found a String of Ears. Very good rolls on the stats, but unfortunately it's also ethereal. On the very next run, Mephisto dropped Ormus Robes, their unique Dusk Shroud. And this more than made up for the troll roll of the String of Ears from the last round. Look at that, 3 to lightning and 15 lightning damage. That's the kind of item you just want to put to use right away, but lightning sorcerers have to wait. We still have plenty of Mephisto runs to go through. Like run 59, where I found my first Guide's Fortune. The roll is pretty bad, but it's still a Guide, so I'm not complaining. Wait, hang on, what's that? An on-screen run counter? So after 50 or so runs, I realized that my current method of run tracking was not gonna cut it for 1000 runs. So I installed a run counter app, and it made my life so much easier from this point forward. After a bit of a dry spell in drops, I found Talrasha's Lidless Eye on run 122. On run 124 I found another unique ring. This time it was an eagle ring, and quite a bad one. On run 139 I found a Rune Master with quite an interesting roll. The high ED together with 5 sockets and the item being ethereal makes it quite rare, but it's probably quite a while away before I have a Sod rune to spare to experiment with this, especially since I'm playing single player. On run 172 I found a nice upgrade for the sorceress. Arachnid Mesh. This would be quite the power boost for the sorceress, but as you can see I'm not even high enough level to use it yet. On run 175 I found a pair of unique javelins. I really enjoyed the Javason and the Amazon class in general, but this roll left a lot to be desired. On run 186 it was time for another unique ring. This time it was a Manald Heal.
On run 212 I found another arachnid mesh. As the saying goes, when it rains it pours. On run 238 I found my first rainbow facet unique jewel. After a little lucky ritual, I revealed a nicely rolled poison facet. After 250 rounds I took a short break from Mephisto to try and level up to 80 to be able to use the arachnid mesh I found before. Little did I know that the ancient tunnels had a nice surprise in store for me. In the corner of my screen I saw a legendary mallet drop. And it was a Schaefer's. A very nice surprise indeed. Back to Mephisto with my newfound power, I found another pair of Titan's Revenge on run 267. And this time the roll was a real nice one. On run 280 I found another rainbow facet. It was another poison facet with a slightly worse but not terrible roll. Run 315 brought me my first pair of chance cards. Not a very good roll, but at least it was an upgrade. Another unique ring dropped on run 343. It was just another manalled heal, but at least the game was kind enough to give me a pair of mage fists as a consolation prize. On run 369 I found a unique amulet that turned out to be High Lord's Wrath. Lots of jewelry lately, and run 382 brought another unique ring. This time a dwarf star. On run 391 some ethereal javelins dropped. Unfortunately these were Thunderstrokes and not Titan's Revenge, so no replenishing stack. Otherwise a pretty mediocre roll, you really want the +4 skills. On run 406 I found an item that I'm quite fond of because I have played a lot of Summoner Necromancers in my days. Arm of King Leoric. Time for another rainbow facet on run 411. This time it was a fire facet, and while the roll is mediocre, at least it was in favor of -2 enemy resistance. From the very beginning of the runs I had secretly been hoping for a specific item to drop, and on run 458 I found it. My first Shaco. I was so excited that I headed immediately to town to go to Act 5 to socket it, only to realize I hadn't even reached Act 5 yet. And it was then I noticed. My first and only Shaco was ethereal. Not gonna lie, that was a bit rough, but at least the chance of the durability going down during meth runs is quite low, so I put it on but held off on socketing it for now. On the very next run, the game tried to make up for it by dropping a nice piece of armor in Skin of the Viper Magi. A pretty decent roll, but I decided to keep using my Magic Find armor for now. Speaking of armors, on run 465 another Ormus Robes dropped. The first one set the bar really high, and this one did not come close. As we were closing in on the halfway point of the project, the game decided to drop a nice upgrade for us in celebration. While I am in the camp that thinks the random teleport on the Oculus is very annoying, it's still a nice upgrade for us at this point. After 500 runs I decided to take a short break and evaluate our progress so far. While some of our gear is still pretty bad and there's definitely room for improvement, I would definitely say that we could qualify as being decently geared at this point. But we're nowhere near done yet, let's move on. On run 527 I found another Guide's Fortune. Not the greatest roll, but it was an upgraded Magic Find. Run 545 brought another unique ring, which turned out to be another bad Nagel. Another unique ring 10 runs later on run 555. Another poor roll, but a Ravenfrost this time. On run 602 I found Talrasha's belt. I unfortunately lost all footage from that run, but I did find this footage from the next run, confirming that it was a bad roll. Then from Mephisto on run 603 I found a unique amulet. This time a Nokko-san relic. Going for 3 in a row, on run 604 I found the unique Balrog spear. It turned out to be ethereal, which has a lot of potential for this item since it has replenishes quantity, but unfortunately the other rolls were pretty bad. After a chaotic fight on round 6-17, I found a pair of unique boots. While Hotspurs only have niche use cases, they're still pretty rare, so I was happy to find them. On run 6-19, I think Mephisto tried to tell me something. He dropped not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 different bows. On run 639, I got to spin the wheel twice when Mephisto dropped a unique ring and a unique amulet on the same run. The amulet turned out to be the Rising Sun, while the ring turned out to be yet another 18% Nagel. On run 667, I drew a sigh of relief when I found a non-ethereal Shaco. I actually hadn't lost a single durability on my ethereal one, but it was still a really nice find. Run 672 brought a very useful item in the unique war belt, Thunder God's Vigor. On run 680 I found another rainbow facet. It turned out to be the highly desired element of lightning, but unfortunately the worst roll possible. On run 639 I found my first pair of War Travelers. Turned out to be a below average roll, but at least it was an upgrade for me. On run 720 I found another Thunderstroke, and this time we got the 4 skills. The ED roll left some to be desired, but that's not the main priority. On run 732 I found a nice item for the Paladin. The Herald of Saccharum. I don't have a Paladin at the moment, but this will be a nice piece of gear when I decide to make one. I found another Ormus Robes on run 744, but this one wasn't anything to celebrate. An amulet on run 745, a Nokusan relic. Then I hit my worst unlucky streak, going for over 100 runs without finding anything worth noting, but on run 857 the streak was broken with a unique ring. It was just a dwarf star, but at least we got to experience the thrill of identifying something again. I found another unique ring on run 900. It was yet another Nagel ring, but this time I was quite happy since it rolled perfect on the magic finds. I found Skulder's Ire on the run 910. This was a nice upgrade for sure, but it was a bittersweet celebration, since this meant that it was time to unequip my thrusty gemmed Gothic plate and put it in the stash. On run 938 I found a Shaco. The third Shaco definitely doesn't hit the same as the first or second, but it always feels good to find a Shaco. On run 941 I found 2 nice Amazon items from the same drop. Another Thunderstroke, although this time the roll was quite bad, and a Razor Tail. On run 951 I had a really nice drop in Dracul's Grasp. There's a lot of variable rolls on this item, and I would say I got a slightly below average one, but I was still happy to find a pair. On run 962 I found a unique amulet. Unfortunately no Maras, but at least it was a High Lord's. We're closing in on 1000 runs here, but luckily Mephisto decided to be a nice guy and finish strong, starting with an amulet on run 991, a Nokusan relic. Another Oculus on run 994, and finishing it all off with a Talrash's belt on run 995, and he was kind enough to drop a perfect magic find one for the finale. So, after 1000 runs we have a geared sorceress and a whole pile of other nice items. These runs took a lot of time and effort, but the question is, was it worth it? And the answer is yes. This is the most budget Diablo 2 build you will ever see. He's got nothing, literally. And he's going up against one of the most dangerous places in Diablo 2, the Chaos Sanctuary with Diablo himself. Is this even possible, or have I got a severe case of overconfidence? Let's go and kick some demon ass or die trying. I'm starting off as a paladin with most of my stats in vitality, but I saved some stat points for gear that I might find later down the road. As for skills, I chose to do a Holy Bolt build for this challenge. The most popular build for running the Chaos Sanctuary is the Hammered In, but I wanted to try it out, and I figured it would be a safer playstyle. Before the Chaos Sanctuary, I had to make my way through the River of Flame. There are sometimes maggots in the way, which can be a problem since Holy Bolt doesn't do anything against them, but other than that, things were going pretty well from the start. Even with no plus skills from gear, a maxed Holy Bolt deals over 2000 damage for only 3 mana. And thanks to Holy Bolt not being boosted by any offensive aura, I was free to use Salvation Aura for a much needed boost to my resist. And of course, Redemption Aura to refill my life and mana between fights. Entering the Chaos Sanctuary itself, the difficulty ramps up a bit. Monsters spawn in huge packs, which makes it much more difficult to manage without getting swarmed. In the beginning I could use the narrow corridors to my advantage, but the Paladin's lack of crowd control has never been so obvious to me as in this challenge. But, I must say, as long as I approached slowly and didn't aggro too many enemies at once, this was not at all as hard as I had imagined. It took some time, but I finally made it to the center. Before attempting to clear the seals, I cleared out the area to have a safe zone to retreat to. As for the seal bosses, Vizier was easiest and didn't pose much of a threat, which is kind of to be expected. Lord Disease is a bit harder and does cause me some problems from time to time in my playthroughs. I prepared by clearing the area of all other monsters before opening the seal and approached him slowly, and it ended up being kind of easy too. On to the third and final pair of seals. I feared that the Infector of Souls would be the hardest problem beforehand, and it proved to be true. He is so fast and he and his pack chased me almost all the way back to the entrance. Eventually they managed to get separated into smaller packs and I could successfully kite them a few at a time. And after a few minutes of cheesing them, Infector of Souls was defeated. After opening all of the seals, I set up my only town portal, because I'm 100% counting on dying here. And then it was time to face Diablo himself. Diablo spawned and I took a few shots at him to see how much damage I would deal. That's not too bad, but he quickly threw me in a bone prison. And while I had time to deal some good damage to him, I couldn't out-heal his damage output without being able to dodge his spells. I took my TP back and he immediately imprisoned me again, but he didn't attack me. So I was just standing around for a while trying to figure out what to do. Eventually I broke out by casting Fist of the Heavens on the prison many times, and I approached Diablo again. I tried dodging his spells for a while, taking shots where I could, but it wasn't long until he trapped me again. But this time I got lucky. While I was sending a constant stream of holy bolts his way, he ran up right next to me, and after slapping me a few times, he started using his lightning attack over and over, which completely missed me, since he was standing too close to me. And shortly after, Diablo went down. In just over 26 minutes I had cleared the Chaos Sanctuary and defeated Diablo without any gear at all. I would perhaps not call this a Magic Find run, maybe more of a Magic Find walk or even a Magic Find crawl. But once I knew it was possible, I wanted to see if I could get this Paladin geared by continuing to run Diablo from here. And I did. Kinda. I ended up doing 50 more runs after the first kill. It was slow, it was tedious, but it was actually doable. I didn't get fully decked out in endgame gear of course, but I ended up with max resists, a good chunk of life, over 200% magic find and decent damage output with a 3k holy bolt and hitting the 75% faster cast breakpoint. That part of the video ended up being kind of boring though, so I deleted it. I did find my first 40% magic find gauge though, which was nice.